Welcome back, historians. What challenges would the Romans have faced in order to retain all of the territory that was part of the Roman Empire in AD 200? The beginning of Rome. Italy is a peninsula in the Mediterranean Sea. It is shaped like a boot. The heel points toward Greece. The toe points toward the island of Sicily. The Alps cross the top of Italy and separate it from the rest of Europe. Another mountain range, called the Apennines, runs down Italy, from north to south. Passes, which run through the mountains, helped link people from different parts of early Italy. They could trade ideas and goods with each other. Italy has a mild climate, rich soil, and large, flat plains that make good farmland. Historians know little about the first people in Italy. Between 2000 BC and 1000 BC, groups of people settled in the hills and on the plains. These people included the Latins. Historians think that a group of Latins tended herds and grew crops on Rome's hills. Their community developed into Rome. The people living there became known as the Romans. Rome was built along the Tiber River about 15 miles from the Mediterranean Sea. The river could be used for fresh water, transportation, and the shipping of goods. Its location meant that sea-going pirates could not attack the city. Rome was built on 7 hills. The hills made it easy to protect the city from attackers. Roman history does not just involve the Latins. Around 800 BC, the Greeks and the Etruscans came to Italy. The Greeks built many colonies in Italy between 750 BC and 500 BC. They taught the Romans to grow olives and grapes and to use the Greek alphabet. Romans also copied Greek sculpture and other art forms. The Etruscans had an even greater influence. They came from the area north of Rome. Many Etruscans were rich miners and traders. Others were devoted to art. They painted pictures and created jewelry, tools, and weapons. When the Etruscans came, Rome was a village with straw huts. That changed, however, after 650 BC when the Etruscans conquered Rome. They taught the Romans to build temples, streets, and public squares. The Etruscans introduced togas and short cloaks. A toga is like a sheet wrapped around your body, with one end over your shoulder. Most importantly, the Etruscans showed the Romans how an army could be more effective. Later, the Romans copied the Etruscan army and conquered an empire, becoming a republic. The Etruscans ruled Rome for more than 100 years. The people benefited from Etruscan culture and ideas, but they got tired of Etruscan rulers. According to Roman tradition, in 509 BC, the Romans rebelled and set up a republic. A republic is a form of government in which citizens elect their leaders. Rome was still a small city when it became a republic. It had enemies all around it. Over the next 200 years, Rome fought many wars. By 267 BC, the Romans had taken over the Greek colonies in what is now known as Italy. By then, the Romans ruled almost all of the Italian peninsula. The Roman Republic grew because of its strong army. Roman soldiers were well trained. At the beginning of the Republic, every male citizen who owned land had to join the army. Men who ran away, or deserted the army, were killed. This turned Romans into loyal fighters. The Romans also thought of better ways to organize their army in battle. At first, the soldiers marched next to each other, moving in one large group. They attacked their enemy from only one direction. This way of fighting was slow. Then the generals changed the style of battle. The Roman generals divided their armies into groups of soldiers called legions. Each legion had about 6,000 men. Legions were broken into even smaller groups of 60 or 120 men. These small groups could move very quickly in battle. Roman soldiers used a short sword called a gladius and an iron spear called a pilum. Each group also had a standard. A standard was a tall pole with a symbol on top, sometimes an eagle or other animal. One soldier would hold up the standard so others could see it. This helped the group stay together during battle. The Romans were also smart planners. They built military towns in every region they conquered. Then they built roads between these towns. Soon their armies could travel quickly across the land. The Romans believed they needed to treat conquered people fairly. They stressed that people would become loyal to Rome if they were treated well. The Romans created the Roman Confederation. It gave some conquered people full Roman citizenship. They could vote and be in the government. They were also treated the same as other citizens by law. The Romans made other people allies. Allies could run their own towns, but they had to pay taxes to Rome. Allies also had to fight in Rome's armies. With these procedures, the Romans hoped to keep peace. If an area did rebel, Rome was ready to squash it. As a result, the Roman Republic grew stronger. Governing Rome. There were two main social classes in early Rome, patrician and plebeian. Patricians were wealthy landowners who held government offices. Most people were plebeians, shopkeepers, artisans, and small farmers. Patricians and plebeians could not marry each other. All patrician and plebeian men were citizens and had the right to vote. They had to pay taxes and join the army, but only patricians could be in the government. The Roman government had three parts. This was to stop any one part from getting too strong. The top leaders were two consuls who served for 1 year. One consul headed the army. The other headed the rest of the government. Each consul could veto, or reject, the other consul's decision. Rome had two legislative bodies, or groups that made laws. The Senate was made up of 300 patrician men. They were senators for life. They passed laws and approved building projects. The second group that made laws was the Assembly of Centuries. It also elected consuls and praetors, or judges. Roman praetors could lead armies and help run the government. Over time, the plebeians became angry. They had the duties of citizens, but they could not be a part of the government. They wanted equal rights. As a result, in 494 BC, the plebeians went on strike. The patricians were scared. To prevent the collapse of the Republic, plebeians were allowed to set up the Council of Plebs. It elected tribunes. The tribunes told the government what the plebeians thought about issues. The tribunes could also veto government decisions. A few wealthy families, however, still held most of the real power. The Roman Republic included dictators. Today, a dictator is a cruel ruler who controls everything. In early Rome, dictators were chosen by the Senate to rule during emergencies. As soon as the emergency ended, the dictator's rule ended. In 458 BC, the Roman army was attacked. The senators chose a farmer named Cincinnatus to be dictator. He had been a respected Roman consul. Cincinnatus gathered an army, which easily defeated the enemy. Afterward, he went home to his farm. Cincinnatus was famous for doing his civic duty by serving his government when he was needed. Plebeians demanded that Rome's laws be written down. That way, everyone could know the laws and make sure the judges followed them. In 451 BC, Rome adopted its first written laws, known as the 12 Tables. They were carved on bronze tablets and placed in the marketplace where everyone could see them. The 12 Tables were based on the idea that all citizens should be treated equally under the law. When Rome began taking over other nations, they made a new set of laws called the Law of Nations. The Law of Nations listed principles, or ideas, for justice. We still use some of these ideas today. For example, American law says that people are innocent until they are proven guilty. Rome's legal system was based on the idea that everyone should be treated equally. This is called the rule of law. Many rich people did not like the rule of law. They were used to having special privileges. In fact, many rich people were not used to obeying the law at all. The rule of law changed that. The Punic Wars. Rome continued to grow. It wanted to control the entire Mediterranean world, but so did an empire named Carthage. Carthage was a trading empire on the coast of North Africa. It was the largest and richest city in the Western Mediterranean. Carthage was built around 800 BC by the Phoenicians, who were skilled sailors and traders. In 264 BC, Rome and Carthage both wanted to rule the island of Sicily. The First Punic War was fought between Rome and Carthage. This war lasted 20 years until Rome won in 241 BC. Carthage had to leave Sicily and pay a huge fine to the Romans. Carthage then conquered southern Spain. The Romans helped the Spanish people rebel. In 218 BC, Carthage sent their great general, Hannibal, to attack Rome. This started the Second Punic War. Hannibal sailed his army from Carthage to Spain. His men rode horses and elephants across the Alps and into Italy. Hannibal's army beat the Romans at Cannae and began raiding Italy. In response, the Roman general Scipio captured Spain and attacked Carthage. Hannibal and his army had to return home to defend their people. Finally, Scipio's army defeated Hannibal's forces. Carthage was forced to give up its navy and give its Spanish territory to Rome. Rome now ruled the western Mediterranean region. Carthage was no longer a military power, but it was still a rich trading center. In 146 BC, during the Third Punic War, Roman soldiers burned Carthage to stop it from getting stronger. Many people in Carthage were enslaved. In the 140s BC, Rome conquered all of Greece. 20 years later, it took its first province in Asia. Romans began to call the Mediterranean Sea Mare Nostrum, which means our sea. Problems in the Republic. Even though Rome's armies were doing well in other parts of the world, Rome had problems at home. By 100 BC, many plebeian farmers could not work on their farms because they were in the army. Others had watched the Carthaginian army destroy their small farms. At the same time, rich Romans were buying land. They formed large farming estates called latifundia. Enslaved people from Carthage worked the land. As a result, the rich charged less for their crops than the plebeian farmers did. This caused plebeian farmers to go out of business. Many farmers went to Rome's cities for work. Jobs were hard to find and did not pay much. Roman politicians feared that the plebeians might riot. To prevent a revolt, they offered poor people cheap food and free shows, called bread and circuses. Two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, wanted to stop the rich from taking small farms. They asked the Senate to return some of the land to the poor. Many senators were against the idea. In 107 BC, a military leader named Marius became consul. Until then, only men who owned property served in the military. They did not get paid. So Marius paid the men who had no land to serve as soldiers. He also promised to give them land. This weakened the government. The soldiers felt more loyalty to the general who paid them than to the republic. This gave generals a lot of power. In 82 BC, General Sulla forced Marius and other generals out of Rome. He made himself dictator. Sulla had shown other generals how to use their armies to grab political power. For the next 50 years, civil war tore Rome apart. The rise of Julius Caesar. By 60 BC, three men emerged as the most powerful in Rome. They were three generals, Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar. They formed the first triumvirate. A triumvirate is a political partnership of three people. After Crassus died in battle, the senators thought that Caesar was becoming too popular. The senators ordered Caesar to give up his army. Instead, Caesar and his soldiers captured all of Italy. In 44 BC, Caesar made himself dictator for life. He also filled the Senate with people who supported him. Caesar knew many reforms were needed. He started new colonies so that farmers and soldiers would have land. He forced patricians to hire free workers instead of using slave labor. Caesar's supporters thought he was a strong leader who brought peace to Rome. His enemies thought that he wanted to be king. On March 15, 44 BC, Caesar's enemies, led by Cassius and Brutus, stabbed him to death. From republic to empire. After Caesar was killed, civil war broke out. Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus won the civil war. Octavian was Caesar's 18-year-old grandnephew. Antony and Lepidus had been Caesar's best generals. In 43 BC, they formed the Second Triumvirate. The Second Triumvirate did not last long. Lepidus retired from politics. Antony fell in love with the Egyptian queen, Cleopatra. The two made an alliance. Octavian thought they wanted to take over Rome. Many Romans were upset by this news. Octavian declared war on Antony. In 31 BC, the navies of Antony and Cleopatra fought those of Octavian at the Battle of Actium. Octavian's forces crushed the couple's army and navy. Antony and Cleopatra later killed themselves. Octavian became Rome's only ruler. Cicero, a writer, political leader, and speaker, strongly supported the Republican government. Octavian, however, believed that a republic was too weak to solve Rome's problems. He wanted power for himself. The Senate finally agreed to his wishes and declared Octavian commander-in-chief. Octavian took the title of Augustus. Augustus means the majestic one. In 27 BC, Caesar Augustus became Rome's first emperor. The rule of Augustus. For hundreds of years, there had been fighting in the area around the Mediterranean Sea. Caesar Augustus, formerly called Octavian, ended the fighting. He took control of the whole area. That brought Pax Romana, or Roman peace. This peace lasted about 200 years. Augustus wanted to make the empire strong and safe. He wanted Rome's borders to be easier to defend, so he made the natural physical features of the land the empire's borders. Augustus built beautiful buildings out of marble. Augustus handed out grain from Africa to the poor. He believed that well-fed people would not rebel against him. The Roman Empire was divided into provinces. Augustus appointed a proconsul, or governor, for each province. He changed the tax laws. He made tax collectors government workers and paid them wages. Augustus also changed Rome's legal system. He made a set of laws for free men who were not citizens. Many of them later became citizens. Augustus ruled Rome for almost 40 years. He died in AD 14. His adopted son, Tiberius, became emperor after Augustus. The next three emperors, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero, were also relatives. They are called the Julio-Claudian emperors. Not all of them were good rulers. Tiberius and Claudius ruled well. In contrast, Caligula and Nero were very cruel. Caligula killed many people, wasted a lot of money, and even made his horse a consul. Nero also killed many people, including his mother and 2 wives. He finally killed himself. The Roman peace. In AD 69, a general named Vespasian restored peace. Vespasian stopped several rebellions. After he died, his son Titus ruled. 2 disasters struck while Titus was emperor. First, the volcano Mount Vesuvius erupted and buried the city of Pompeii. Second, a large fire damaged Rome. After Titus, Vespasian's other son, Domitian, ruled. Both of Vespasian's sons helped Rome grow and prosper. From AD 96 to AD 180, a series of good emperors came to power. They were Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. During their rule, trade grew and people had a better life than before. The 5 good emperors ruled wisely. All 5 built roads, bridges, monuments, harbors, and aqueducts. An aqueduct is a channel that carries water for long distances. The empire was biggest in size when Trajan ruled. It spread from the Mediterranean to Britain in the northeast and Mesopotamia in the east. This made the empire too big to rule well. Many rulers after Trajan pulled troops out of areas they could not defend well. For example, Hadrian pulled troops out of Mesopotamia. He made the empire's boundaries at the Rhine and the Danube rivers stronger. By the AD 100s, the Roman Empire was one of the largest empires in history. It had 3.5 million square miles, 9.1 million square kilometer, of land. The empire was united because people thought of themselves as Romans. Even if they spoke different languages, they had the same laws, rulers, and culture. By AD 212, every free person was thought of as a Roman citizen. Agriculture was the most important part of the empire's economy. Some cities became centers for making pottery, cloth, and brass. Traders came from all over the world to ports in Italy. They brought silk from China, spices from India, tin from Britain, lead from Spain, and iron from Gaul. The Roman Empire had a good system of paved roads. This helped trade grow. The Roman Navy kept pirates off the Mediterranean Sea. This made it safer for ships to bring goods in and out of the empire's ports. By AD 100, everyone in the empire used a common currency, or money. This made it easy to trade. It meant that a merchant in Greece could sell to a person in Italy or Egypt. People also used a system of weights and measures to set prices, trade, and ship goods. Many people became wealthy. However, most people in the cities and on the farms were still poor. Many other people were still enslaved.